Saint John the Apostle. He was with his brother James fishing at the Lake Galilee, that is in the Middle East, between Syria, the West Bank, and Israel. And there he was fishing with his brother James, and when Jesus passed them, and he and his brother James became part of the 12 disciples of Jesus. And James, Saint John the Apostle, and also Peter witnessed, for example, when the raising of Jericho's daughter, and the transfiguration and the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. And also, it is probably Saint John the Apostle who is the beloved disciple. And at the Last Supper, where Saint John the Apostle leaned to Jesus Christ, and also Jesus Christ charged him to look after his mother during the crucifixion of Jesus. And also he and Peter were the first one when going to the tomb on the morning of the resurrection. Then later in life, he was probably at Ephesus in Western Turkey and writing things there, for example, and there were many people believing in other gods, for example, in Diana, and there was the high priest of the people who adorned Diana, and he challenged him then with drinking a poison cup, so the high priest, Saint John the Apostle. And he was then bent at some time by the Roman Emperor Domitian onto the island Patmos, and where he got the vision of the apocalypse. Saint John the Apostle stood up for a church of inclusiveness, no matter what class, gender, or ethnic background a person has, and he also wanted and tried to help people to overcome the stereotypes or prejudice against other people, for example, the Samaritans. And some lines which he wrote are, for example, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love." And that is according to Malcolm Day's A Treasury of Saints book on the page 42 and 43. Hi and welcome. I'm trying to learn Biographyology. Today, Saint John the Apostle, and after we've done with, we're going to do Extensor Kappa Unas Strength Training. And if you participate in the Extensor Kappa Unas Strength Training, then it's at the August. Saint John the Apostle. He died late in the 1st century. Feast day are May the 6th and December the 27th in the West, and September 26th in the Eastern Church. Symbols and art: a cup containing a viper, a book and eagle, and patronage of theologians, writers, publishers, and booksellers. Paintings by El Greco, Apostle Saint John the Evangelist. Profile: a fisherman and disciple of Jesus, by tradition the author of a 4th Gospel, in which he is taken to be the beloved disciple, 3 epistles in the book of Revelation. He is also known as the Divine. And he is quoted out of the 1st epistle of John, chapter 4, verse 7 to 8. "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not, knoweth not God, for God is love." And now, you said now, these famous verses sum up the message of Saint John, whose repeated urgings of his followers to love one another echoed Christ's commandment. Living at a time when much was speculated about the meaning of Christ's incarnation on earth, John encapsulates its purpose in this notion of love. He, more than any other 1st century writer, with the exception of St. Paul, became the talk-bearer of the essence of faith, which he elaborated in his Gospel and letters. Okay, John the Apostle. He was one of the disciples of Jesus, as he said, and when at the time after Jesus had been crucified, people were wondering about the meaning of what Jesus Christ had said, and St. John the Apostle said that one of the main thing is, for love is God, God is love, basically. And let us love one another. Discipleship. Chosen to be disciples while fishing at Lake Galilee, John and his brother James were called sons of thunder by Jesus for their fiery temperament. Some believe this to be an allusion to their status as zealots or freedom fighters intent on raising rebellion against the Roman occupiers. More apparent is that he became one of an inner group, along with James and Peter, who were privileged witnesses to certain events such as the raising of Jericho's daughter, the Transfiguration, and the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay, Saint John the Apostle and also his brother John, these were two fisher at the Lake Galilee. I'm not completely sure if I understand it correctly, but the river Jordan runs down between the border between Israel and Syria, and also down in the Lake Galilee is then up there. So part is in Israel, part in Syria, I think. It goes down to the Dead Sea and then to Jordan probably. Now, they're in the Lake Galilee, east of Israel, but a part of Israel is the Lake Galilee. There John and James were fishers, and when Jesus went to them, and it is said here that he called them the sons of thunder because of their fiery temperament. And there is something written about that they were rebellious against the Roman occupiers. And also he became, so St. John that said he became an important person who witnessed many things, like also James and Peter, other disciples. For example, the raising of Jericho's daughter, the Transfiguration, and the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. I heard about them, but I'm not really able to explain it right now. I don't want to confuse anything. I don't really know what is going on there. Otherwise, I would say no. John is thought to be the mysterious beloved disciple of a fourth gospel, since he is not named in person elsewhere in the book. It is he who leaned against Christ's rest at the Last Supper, he whom Jesus charges with the care of his mother Mary at the foot of the cross, and he who ran with Peter to the tomb on the morning of the resurrection. Okay, there are the Gospels somewhere written in the fourth one, there is talked about one disciple, and because nowhere else is talked about St. John the Apostle, it must be in this fourth one talked about St. John as the beloved disciple. And when there's also the story of the Last Supper, is it the day before the crucifixion? With Jesus, where all the disciples and Jesus are together and eating, and John the Apostle is leaning. I don't know if it's described now in the Bible or just the painting of Da Vinci, but one of them is leaning against Jesus Christ. And also Jesus says to James Paul, to Saint John, that he should take care of his mother Mary. And it's also St. John and Peter who going then 3 days later probably to the tomb. Their resurrection should have happened. And in later life, there is some doubt about whether the Apostle John was the same person as the evangelist who wrote the fourth gospel. If they are one and the same, he wrote it in Ephesus, one of the Greek-speaking colonies of Christians. He founded in Western Asia Minor, Turkey, and there he settled. Someone somewhere wrote the Gospels, and it could be that the fourth one was written by St. John. And if he did, when he was writing it in the place Ephesus, not the language, in the place Ephesus, which would have been, which was a place where Greek-speaking Christians were in Turkey. By this time, he was an old man living at the end of the 1st century. The city, as with most in the region, was a hotbed of pagan idolatry. One of the most popular gods was Diana, whose high priest, it is said, once challenged John to drink a poison cup, giving rise to his symbol of art of a viper in a cup. Okay, and it's like that there were some people worshipping Diana. Was it the Queen of Hunters or something? by some people adorned as a godly figure. And no, the priest of the people who were adorning Diana, I don't know, of hunting or something. There's a poet, Diana, Queen and Huntress, by John Keats and so on. And now challenging who's drinking a poison cup and who survives or something. And Saint John the Apostle seemed to have survived. While condemned by Emperor Domitian to exile on the island of Patmos, John received a vision of the Apocalypse, or Book of the Revelation, which he addressed to his 7 churches of Asia. The probably Roman Emperor Domitian exiled him for some reason, maybe because he was a Christian, to the island of Patmos, and there he had a vision which was telling him about the apocalypse, and he then told the other people of the 7 churches of Asia about the coming apocalypse. Saint John in the Isle of Patmos. Above a 19th century woodcut of Saint John with his evangelist emblem of the eagle. Okay, that's the 19th century woodcut. I don't really know what is a woodcut. Is it actually made of wood? The original. Love for all. One of the traits of the early churches was its openness to all, irrespective of class, gender, or ethnic background. One of its pioneers was Saint John. Despite being Jewish, he ignored the traditional contempt his people held for Samaritans and confirmed thousands of them in the new faith. The story of a woman of Samaria, told only in Saint John's Gospel, likewise illustrates how prejudice and stereotyping in society can be overcome. So he was stepping up for the message of love for all, and the church there at the time also was one which was celebrating openness, that everyone of class, gender, and ethnic background is welcome. And at that time, there seemed to be this disharmony between, I think, the Jews and the Samaritans. And Saint John was a Jew, and it seems to be the story of Samaritans. So there was a woman in need or something, and the Samaritan helped her, or was he helping the Samaritan? Basically, he wanted that Samaritans and Jews are living together in peace. And his Saint John's Gospel also illustrating and showing stories how thinking about other people that can be overcome, and people can start to love each other. That was the biographyology part. If you're here for biographyology, you can go directly to the next one, biographyology. Read it again, and then we try to make a little presentation about Saint John the Apostle. If you stay here and participate in the extensive Kabbalah strength training, we're going to sit here on this good and stable standing stance, and the arms up, the fists, and bring them down. And if you participate in this, the arms and Leute, and we get down. And we're having 3 rules. The first one is that we're stopping immediately as soon as there is pain. And the second rule is that we come only as far as we can go with a little bit of effort. And the third rule is that it's not overdoing it. We just want, if we're not overdoing it, we just want to strengthen, not to exhaust. Now you can use a socket t-shirt or a towel. Hands with good force in the hand, good pressure, and bring it down. And again up. And change to the other hand, press, and again up. And change, and press. And bring to the other side. Only as far as it goes, all painless, and again. Other hand, press, and in. And on top, and again down. Press evenly with all 5 fingers. And change. and bitte Ostern. Ik zit ook op een luisteraar. I thank you very much and have a good day.